Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Hear an echo. Oh, is it? All right. The January 10th, 2024 meeting of the San Mateo County Board of Education will come to order. As is our practice, this meeting will be recorded. The board provides remote access for members of the public and welcomes community members joining in person and remotely. The board is following the requirements of Assembly Bill 2449, which enables remote participation by board members only under specific circumstances. We use simultaneous interpretation in Spanish for those attending virtually through the end of public comment. Translation will continue further into the meeting if people are utilizing the channel. Thank you to our interpreter, Teresa Mendeville, for joining us remotely. For meeting attendees wishing to access the Spanish translation channel on Zoom, please click on the interpretation button on the menu bar. We ask that all speakers be mindful of our Spanish interpretation and please speak slowly and clearly. I ask board members to speak directly into the microphone and remind all speakers who are wearing masks to remove their masks when speaking in order to be clearly heard by all attendees. Lastly, we warmly welcome our Youth Commission Liaison, Bethany Zhao. All right, item 1B is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
There's a motion by Trustee Gerard and a second by Trustee Lempert. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes with a vote of 7-0, and the agenda for tonight's meeting has been approved. Item 2 is public comment. Guidelines for public comment are available on the SMCOE website and in our online agenda, our board docs, as well as on the table outside our boardroom in both English and Spanish. If there are speakers who require Spanish interpretation, our interpreter, Ms. Mendeville, will interpret following each speaker's comments. At this time, members of the public may provide comment for topics not included on the approved agenda. The County Board of Education cannot act upon any matter that has not been agendized except under limited circumstances as permitted by law. It is the policy of the County Board to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and/or action where appropriate. Superintendent McGee, do we have any comments submitted prior to the meeting?
We do not.
Thank you. Speakers are invited to make a live comment and have 3 minutes to speak. The board's executive assistant, Jennifer Perna, will keep the time and advise when the speaker has 30 seconds left. Please keep within the time limits. Are there any?
We have no speaker cards.
No speaker cards. Okay. To make a comment over Zoom, members of the public may use the raise hand feature. Instructions for using this feature are provided as an attachment in the board packet. And once your hand is raised, please wait to be acknowledged by Superintendent McGee. Are there any members of the public attending remotely who wish to make a comment at this time? Any hands raised?
I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay. Members of the public, okay. Members of the public may also provide live comment in person. And I think you already said there aren't any cards submitted.
Right.
I think I did that out of order. I'm not sure how. Public comment addressing specific items will be heard immediately before the board takes them up. If members of the public wish to speak to a specific agenda item, please use the raise hand feature when the item is announced, or if in person, submit a card in advance of the item. Right. For item 3A, Superintendent McGee will make a presentation for School Board Recognition Month. Superintendent McGee.
Good evening, Board President Benini, and it's nice to see you in this role. And members of the board, Happy New Year to everybody. I'm happy to be here in person to recognize your service as county board members. It is School Board Recognition Month. We're going to keep it pretty simple, but the The flowers at your desk were prepared by staff today thoughtfully. And we went to a special bakery for your wrapped cookies there. You're going to get plenty of sweet and sugar tonight because we're going to take a break and have some cake, and then you have these giant cookies. So we'll have to carry you out at the end, but it's all in with love and appreciation for everything that you do for the students in San Mateo County, for the students of the County Office of Education, and for the county education and the state education status for students across the state. We added up your years of service together, and together you add up to 124 years. That's a lot. And I would bet that across the state, you would be one of the highest, given that we have some 30s in the room, 30-year-olds. So that's pretty special. I should probably talk to the county superintendents and see if anybody else comes close, and maybe we can get some special highlighting of that across the state, because it's pretty remarkable, your years of service together. Each of you brings your own special lens and focus to the work. Board President Benini, one of the many things that you advocate for is ensuring support for students with disabilities. We could make a long list of other topics there, but that is certainly one of your key advocacy issues, and you make such a difference, both here at the county office, in the county, and across the state. So thank you for your service there. Vice President Torres, making sure you're very focused on student voice, and love the fact that you work with students every day. Their voices are in your head all day long. And so I'm really glad that you're here at the dais to make sure that they are represented in the ways in which we would like. Board Member Gerard, you're just everywhere locally, regionally, and at the state level, advocating for the best things for students all the time. Again, in my recognition of your board presidency, it's really astounding to me how much time and energy you spend on this work. It's really, really something special. So thank you. Board Member Alvaro, in addition to your advocacy for early learning and for our students in the juvenile justice system, which have been a lifelong advocacy for you, you are really focused on making sure that we are covering the spectrum of students birth to age 22 in serving all their needs. And for Mr. Lempert, congratulations on getting your California Children Now report card out. That was really very well done, with great PR and marketing to get the best audience possible to pay attention to what's really important, but the ways in which you hold us all accountable for improving outcomes for students is something that we deeply appreciate, and that you really specially bring to the board service. Board Member Cannon, as a lifelong educator yourself, you're often tapping into the experience of teachers, assistant principals, and really putting yourself in their shoes when you think about your board service. And so our educators need you advocating for them. And we appreciate how you bring that perspective to the discussion. And finally, Board Member Camacho, ensuring that education is centered on equity. Again, always raising the question about how we're serving the most vulnerable or marginalized communities in the policy work and procedures that we carry out here at the county office, and also advocating across the state. Your daily work is dead centered on equity, bringing diverse representative teachers and educators into the classroom to serve our students. So thank you for your service and for your everyday job. So one thing that's really unique in this time, maybe we've seen this cycle back before, but across the state, you know, it's really a controversial time to be a school board member. It's really tough. And while I wasn't able to attend the CSBA conference in San Francisco, I did hear that some of those sessions were some of the most rankling and controversial as far as mixed opinions about the ways in which we should be educating our students. And one thing that we're deeply grateful for here is that all 7 board members are deeply united in serving students with an equity lens in a trauma-informed way, in progressive policies that make sure that we break systemic systems that have not well served our kids. And that is something that you never disagree on, that we can always count on you to stand up for kids in that way. So thank you. And so really just a simple thank you to each and every one of you. We will, I think, next take a break to have a little bit of cake and visit a little bit to celebrate you. We will be honoring you through the rest of the month through our social media accounts and doing the best we can to uplift the important role of our school and county board members throughout the state. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So as Superintendent McGee noted, for the next item, the board will take a brief recess to celebrate the recognition, the board, school board recognition month. And we can resume, let's say at 7:25, 7:15.
Well, okay then.
Oh, thank you.
We're going to reconvene the meeting in about a minute if everybody can make their way back to the dais. All right. Thank you for the lovely break. It was nice to chat with everyone. All right, we're reconvening, 7:30 now. For item 5A, we have our minutes from December 13th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion from trustee Gerard and a second from trustee Lempert. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes 7-0. Item 6 is our consent agenda. The consent agenda is not debatable and requires a unanimous vote for passage. An item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular order of business for separate discussion and action if any member of the board, the superintendent, or the public so requests. Are there any requests for removal of items from the consent agenda? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by trustee Alvaro and second by trustee Gerard. Is there, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Okay, we're on to item 7A. Yes. Item 7A, Joy Dardanelle, Executive Director, District Improvement and Support, and Jeff Schmidt, Coordinator, District Improvement and Support, will provide a presentation on the 2023-2024 Williams Annual Report specific to compliance reviews conducted in the county by San Mateo County Office of Education staff. Executive Director Dardanelle and Coordinator Schmidt. Thank you.
Good evening, Board President Benini, members of the board, Superintendent McGee. It's our pleasure to present to you the information on the Williams Annual Report and our school visits this year. I am now going to introduce Jeff Schmidt, our Coordinator of District Improvement and Support.
Thank you, Joy, and Happy New Year, everybody. As we summarize the last year of Williams, it's nice to start a new year fresh. So this year with Williams, they released the Williams list in July rather than the normal February or March time that they have in the past due to some legislative changes. We were happy that they did delay that because it allowed us, to keep the same list of schools that we had the previous year, which I'll talk about in a moment. The Williams list includes schools that are identified for comprehensive support and improvement, CSI, pursuant to the federal Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. Additionally, schools where 15% or more of the teachers are not possessing a valid or clear preliminary teaching credential are also eligible. So what we ended up with was the same schools from the previous list, which is nice because we develop relationships. We go in there, they know who we are, they know what to expect. And so it was really neat. So we had the same 19 schools that were identified from the previous year. 6 of those were high schools. 5 of them were K-8 schools, 4 middle schools, 3 elementary schools, 1 K-12 online school, and 10 charter schools. When they changed the legislation a couple of years ago, they added charter schools to the Williams audit. So we had 100% of the classrooms with sufficient textbooks and instructional materials. There was one 5-day letter that we refer to as a 5-day letter. What that means is the County Office of Education gets to have 5 days to send out a letter if there was an insufficient finding with instructional materials. And so we did send out that letter, but it turned out it was a new principal that was a little bit unaware of this new online history curriculum that they had. So it actually wasn't a sufficiency in the instructional materials in the classroom. The online aspect of that was actually teacher resources that the teachers accessed online. So what we thought was they didn't have enough Chromebooks, but they showed us and documented that none of that curriculum needs to be accessible through a Chromebook, and it's all accessible through printed materials, and the students were able to take it home. So that brought us to the 100%. So that was nice. As far as the facilities review, we use a FIT report to document what we find in the facilities with our facilities review team. We did have 2 instances this year of deficiencies, which is the first time we've experienced that since I've been working here, my 3rd year. One school had one of their buildings on their campus where all the fire extinguishers do not have current tags, and it turns out the fire marshal just missed that building. So we informed them that they needed what the problem was. They were able to take care of it right away. The fire marshal came in within a couple of days, and I went back and looked, and sure enough, they had all the tags properly tagged, all the extinguishers. And we had another large district that had a problem with the availability of the feminine products in the bathrooms, which is a new requirement. So we worked back and forth with them a little bit and got them to fix that also. And that was fixed within the 30-day requirement. So it's nice to see the results of these inspections and to see that it's making a difference, because it's really important that the students have access to not only instructional materials, but the facilities that are required. And in this case, products. All the SARCs that we reviewed met the basic reporting requirements for instructional materials and credentialing and facilities. And this year we received 2 UCP complaints that were filed during the 22-23 school year. They were both from the same school district. They were both related to teacher assignments and have been remedied at their level within the time frame that is required. The HR department here receives an official summary from the CTC, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and that did not come in before we did this report. That's sort of a separate entity. So the data may be a little bit different than the 2 complaints that we received, and the HR department, credentialing department can give you more information on that. That is something that we do talk about in the Williams annual reports when we can. With that, I know that was short and sweet, but are there any questions?
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, seeing none. Are there any questions from the public? Any public comment on this item? Doesn't seem so. Okay, great. Thank you
Thank you
very
so much.
much. And there is no action to take on this item. All right, item 7B. Jared Prolo, Executive Director, Research and Systems Planning, will present the 2023 California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, the CASP, results, and a preview of the 2023 California School Dashboard. Executive Director Prolo. Welcome.
Good evening, Board President Bonini, members of the board, and Superintendent McGee. It's my pleasure to present the results of the school dashboard and some summary and information about it. The dashboard was released publicly on December 15th of the prior year, and happy to go over some of the trends and items from that. And so we'll talk a little bit about a reminder of what's in the dashboard, some insights into trends that are across the county, and a little bit of a discussion about the accountability identifications that'll come out of that dashboard. We're nearing the end of the sort of modified dashboards. We kind of went through years of dashboards being canceled or indicators being missing. We're almost back. There is a color assigned on the 5x5 grid for almost every indicator, accounting for both the status and change. The one that is still showing the sort of cell phone bars is the college and career indicator, which makes a return to the dashboard this year after being off for a number of years. And so that one will be the one that's left to need another year to get that change. So a reminder that academic performance indicators are based off of CASP and the CalAlt assessment. Those are for English language arts and mathematics. There has been some talk about how to incorporate some of our other academic assessments, but they have not yet been incorporated into the dashboard. And that is for grades 3 through 8 and 11. I didn't include a chart for this because we did talk about the CASP results at a prior board meeting, and that the dashboard results mirror those sorts of things, where we did see mild improvements in mathematics and kind of flat to slight declines in English language arts. And that was consistent across the state and consistent in our county. Chronic absenteeism is an area that we've really been paying a lot of attention to during and post-pandemic. As a reminder, a student is chronically absent if they miss 10% of the time enrolled, and it doesn't matter if there's a good reason for it or not. This is really accounting for, are the students in school or are they not in school? So illnesses do still count towards chronic absenteeism, and it is for the student's time enrolled. So if a student is enrolled for 90 days, they're going to calculate their 10% off of that enrollment time period. I made some charts to sort of summarize what's happening with chronic absenteeism in our county. And these series of charts map both the status for last year and the change from the prior year on the two axes, the status being on the vertical axis and the change being on the horizontal. I put little guides to try and help identify key areas where the change, that vertical line is that no change. So for chronic absenteeism, to the left, the negative numbers are good, that we want chronic absenteeism to go down, and the numbers on the right are less good. The horizontal line at 10% is the bottom of the medium gap in area on the 5x5 chart. So we would ideally like to see everybody below that being in medium, low, or very low chronic absenteeism. This does overall, and I should, continue that the dots are sized for this, the number of students in that student group, and each dot represents a student group at a district. And so every district is represented, and every student group at every district who receives a color is represented, and the color of the dot matches the color from the dashboard. So trying to cram a lot of information in one spot. And the idea here is to really look at kind of sort of big picture, like where are clusters centered, where's the spread, and so on and so forth. And I think for chronic absenteeism, the most interesting thing is, for me, that we kind of had this thought in 21, 22 that, oh, well, next year, these huge chronic absenteeism issues related to COVID and students being sick and all sorts of disruptions, it'll, fix itself in the coming years. We're not seeing that materialize. And in fact, you can kind of see with the dots being even centered at chronic absenteeism is increasing for a lot of student groups over the prior year. So when we look at this and we have conversation with districts, this was a little bit unexpected that although people did kind of see it in action developing last year, but chronic absenteeism really does continue to be a major concern for all of our school districts and for many of our student groups. English learner progress is a interesting indicator that we're looking at how students are performing year to year on the LPAC. And it is kind of 2 years compared to 2 years, because we're looking at students either making progress or maintaining the highest level on the LPAC examination between the 21-22 and the 22-23 school year. And then we're comparing that progress to the prior year's 2 years progress. So it is like a 2-year progress compared to a 2-year progress. And fewer dots because it's only English learners. So every district's English learners are represented here. And you can see that it is a little bit of a mixed story. Our schools, though, that have larger populations of English learners are seeing a decline in English learner progress on the LPAC. I will say that this can sometimes be a little bit of a tricky indicator to understand because reclassification can play a role in how things end up here. Some years ago, and I always try and remind people of this, that the state of California used to include reclassification in this indicator, but we were told we were no longer allowed to by the federal government because you can't include students who are no longer English learners in your English learner student group. I think that it does sometimes make some of these measurements misleading because reclassification is a very good thing. but it can sometimes hurt your performance on these indicators. But we would like to see a situation happen where more students are either making level growth year to year or maintaining the highest level, and seeing all of those large groups of English learners on the wrong side of the growth thing is an area of concern. Graduation rate is mostly straightforward. It is the students who are graduating with their cohort, although there is a provision made for fifth-year graduates. If you do meet some criteria and finish in the subsequent year compared to the class of students that you started with. And overall, the graduation rate for all students in San Mateo County is high. Almost all of our student groups are at that medium, high, or very high level. Lots of student groups are making positive growth. And we really are kind of considering some of the smaller student groups that are there in the lower areas as individual sort of cases. Oftentimes these are students with disabilities who are needing additional supports or access or changes in coursework so that they can better access their diploma pathways. But generally, graduation rate is high for all of our students. Suspension rate is students who are suspended at least once. Suspensions are not double counted, so once a student is suspended, they are counted in the suspension rate, and that counts for any student who's suspended by a school enrolled in that school at any point during the school year. And I would say suspension rates are generally low. Almost all of our student groups are centered, in the spot where we'd like to see them in that medium, low, or very low, so below that horizontal line. I will say that there is that sort of clustering to the right side, that suspension rate is increasing slightly. I will say that having more students back in school for more days has a correlative effect with increasing suspension rate, that students who are absent don't get suspended. And so there is some effect of bringing students back on campus more that may be influencing that. The other thing that I do want to point out, and this is true for all of the charts, but I think it's most apparent in suspension rate, that where we see very high suspension rates, so not the performance we want to see, and we see changes that are dramatic, oftentimes those have been really small dots, and it's really apparent here where we see all of these red dots that are small in the upper right hand quadrant. And there's two things that are worth remembering about that. The first of which is there is a higher degree of variability that's just inherent to smaller student groups. When we're talking about the minimum number, which is 30 students for most student groups, suspending one student is a 3% change, which is a substantial change according to the 5x5 chart. So single students can make larger impacts when the student group is small. So you'll see more variability year to year in those small student groups. The other thing, though, that I would point out is that this is really the sort of graphical representation of inequity, right? That we have large student groups that are generally well served, and I think we can make the statement that many students are very well served by our schools in our county, and we have these small pockets of student groups in places that are not being well served. And I think that is this is the sort of the visual representation of the sometimes easy to overlook or sometimes difficult to tackle challenges with certain student groups in our schools. The final indicator is the college and career readiness indicator. And this was introduced more or less as a response to some of the critiques around the graduation rate, which, if you remember, we implemented an exit exam for a while as one attempt at this. This, I think, is a more appropriate way of looking at, sure, students are graduating, but how well prepared are they for what we want them to do after they leave our schools? And they created this idea of prepared for college and career. There are multiple pathways that you can qualify for prepared for college or career. We made this chart, which I think is a helpful one to understand how our students are meeting some of these criteria. The percentages in each square are the percentage and number of students who met the measure out of the whole graduation cohort. And a couple of things that I think are interesting to point out is that the traditional ways that we think of meeting college and career readiness are still overwhelmingly how our students access sort of prepared measures here. The A through G completion, which does include a requirement to meet certain test scores on the state test, or the Smarter Balance test is how most of our students meet this criteria. AP exams are another very common means of doing so. The state seal by literacy, I think, isn't working in this county how we might imagine that we'd want it to work. While it's fantastic that so many of our Asian students and white students are, and 2 or more race students are meeting the requirements and completing their seal by literacy, it is, I think, a little bit shocking that the Hispanic Latino population is not accessing this at the rate as some of their other peers. The other thing that I wanted to point out was kind of interesting was that the, I'm trying to remember which. Yeah, for students with disabilities, that the way that students are accessing the various pathways is more sort of evenly spread. It's still not as high as we would want it to be, but for certain populations, student populations, it's interesting to see that there's more success. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. It was the college credit course, especially for Hispanic Latino students, was the one that I was looking at. And specifically looking at the difference between Hispanic Latino students meeting the AP exams requirement and meeting the college credit course, that our Hispanic Latino students are doing better in real college than they are at the AP class and exam pathway, or at least they're accessing it at greater rates and completing it at greater rates, which I think says great things about some of our dual enrollment programs and the way that our high schools have adopted those and made those available for students, but also the quality and success of those programs to reach students who may not have accessed that type of opportunities in the past. Something that we always talk about when we're talking to districts in the community is just a brief thing about how we want to use this information. And as a reminder, this is really high level data. It is summative, and some of these students are no longer in our schools at all when we talk about graduation rate and college and career readiness. And so we really want to use this to generate good questions. And some of them I've also introduced as we were talking about the data. And in particular, when we're looking at the dashboard sort of through the dashboard interface, that equity report at the bottom of each of them is where I always encourage district leaders to engage their communities around. Because, for example, this is pulled off of our dashboard for English language arts for one of the school districts in our county. And on one level, you say like, oh, we're green. That's where we want to be for English language arts. And then you see the equity report where some students are very well served and some students are not being well served. And it's worth asking the question of like, why is there this bimodality in how students are being served in the schools? And then through the process of inquiry and gathering more information, we really do then want everybody to launch into improvement work where they focus in on what they believe are some of the root causes and build projects through cycles of inquiry and are constantly sort of trying and then gathering more information to evaluate if they're making the positive changes for students that they want to make. The final part about all this is the dashboard is our accountability system. And so schools and school districts are identified for additional supports based off of the performance on this dashboard. The first of which is differentiated assistance, which is a district level identification. And I don't want to go too much into detail of it here because oftentimes we will have a presentation talking about the great work that Executive Director Dardanelle does with her team with our districts in differentiated assistance. But based on this dashboard, we did have 7 districts exit DA that they were receiving differentiated assistance, and they saw improvements to the point where they no longer qualify for that assistance. And as technicality, 3 of them were then re-identified. They saw improvements in the areas that they needed to in order to that they were qualified previously. So we exited them, and then they're identified for different things this year. In particular, I wanted to call it that 23 individual student groups no longer met those qualification standards. A lot of the student groups who were frequently exited were students with disabilities and our African-American students, which was encouraging to see that repeatedly improvements were being made, and those student groups are no longer performing in that lowest category across multiple indicators. And then for the subsequent year, we will be supporting 12 school districts and two charter schools. It is the first year that charters are available for differentiated assistance. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Jared. Does the board have any questions or comments? Trustee Alvaro.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Polo. Your reports are always so useful, truly useful. I just have 2 questions. On the graduation rates, it was how many students graduated with their cohort? Does their cohort include, and I know I've asked this for years and years, their 12th grade cohort or their kindergarten cohort or something in between?
It is a good question. And the cohort is not always an easy thing because there are like details and details. It is who you enter 9th grade with. And so it is the cohort that you enter that 9th grade school year that establishes that cohort.
So we're still not tracking if a student makes it from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade.
That's correct.
We're tracking if they make it from 9th grade to 12th grade,
Yes.
which is okay. But I just anecdotally, having been around the high schools for many, many years, I watched that 8th grade to 9th grade summer be a kind of a black hole for a lot of kids. They don't make it to 9th grade. And so that the fact to me has always been that if we don't track them earlier than 9th grade, it's really, it's not a real number anymore, to my opinion. But not that you can fix it, but I always ask if we're thinking about it. The other question I had was about your college readiness slide. I noticed that, what slide was that? Here we go, 14. In the column under foster youth, all the numbers were 0. Can you help me with that?
So I think there may be for some of the student groups that we have very small numbers. There's a little bit of a reporting anomaly because if a high school doesn't have enough students in the cohort, their numbers will be suppressed completely. So for example, if they had 9 foster youth in that cohort, there's going to be no data reported for us. And so I think most likely, and I'd have to go back to check to make absolute sure, but I'm pretty sure that we actually probably should be putting NAs in there as opposed to zeros, because it isn't a literal 0. It's just we don't have the data reported for foster youth. But I will double check on that one.
And I understand if the group is too small for each individual school district, it certainly isn't too small for the entire county, but that isn't the way we're looking at these numbers, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because that particular chart, we're actually having to piece it together from a couple, like the state doesn't report it that way. They report a similar chart, but they do it only counting the denominator as students who met CCI. And so they're reporting like, oh, here you had 68% of your students meet CCI, and then here are the percentages of how they met. I think it's way more instructive to look at it out of the total graduating cohort as opposed to the just the students who met. But because of that, we don't have the raw data. we're piecing it together out of some other reports.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Mr. Lemper?
Just a couple questions and then a comment. So just on the suspensions, are you, I know there's been a lot of work done around the state to really try to reduce suspensions, especially among Black and brown students and no more willful defiance. What are we seeing in this county? I mean, are the suspensions down by race, or there's still a lot of racial disparities in those?
There are still a lot of racial disparities. I think that there were sort of two things that were happening that makes the trends a little bit hard to see. The first of which was we saw a pretty significant increase in what a lot of educators would call like extreme behaviors in schools coming out of the pandemic, of students who really struggled to readjust to school conditions. And some of those behaviors were difficult to work with. And of course, I think a lot of people did their best to divert from suspensions, but some of them were definitely suspendable offenses. So I think that because of some of the good ed code changes that have happening at the same time as coming out of the pandemic, it's made it hard to see what the sort of true impact was of some of those changes. We did see many districts have a lot of reductions in their suspension rates for Black African American students and Hispanic Latinos, but it wasn't this sort of like universal trend that we suddenly saw this like huge reaction based off of the change. And I think it's because of the complex nature of the time that it happened in.
And then another question, I just wanted you to say a little bit more. I was stunned when I looked at those stats on the seal of bilingualism in two languages. I mean, part of it's an asset to speak multiple languages. All our English learners in this state, rather it should be a positive, like, wow, you have what so many other people should have or wish they had. Yet I looked at, I mean, what's going on? How could those percentages be so low for English learners? And I know you expressed surprise too, but it would seem like bilingualism would be something we'd see so more of in that population group.
Yeah, so the seal by literacy in particular, and they actually have made changes this year. This next year will be the first year that they actually changed the requirements, because what they were finding was it was the English test requirements for biliteracy, because you have to meet requirements in both languages, English and another. But the English requirements were making it so that students who didn't have English as their first language were not accessing the seal by literacy.
Gotcha. Okay.
And after doing some good academic work and seeing like, okay, this is actually really messed up.
Yeah.
They have changed the requirements to try and make sure that our students who are coming to us with a language other than English first do have the same sort of access to that biliteracy recognition as students who start with English.
And then finally, I don't want to, well, I'm not going to apologize. I'll be a broken record every day. I just want to make a comment, not just to you, but everyone here. It's not just, I'm not sure it's asking the question. We know racism, probably, I mean, everything the discrimination, everything that's led to lower performance. It's not the student's fault, but why outcomes have been so different in part on race. And you guys are front and center on this, right? Unfortunately, Black students were left out because of Prop 209, but the state's working on changing that. But English learners, like there's districts in this county, they're getting more district money than other districts specifically to serve English learners and to serve foster youth, as Ms. Alvaro mentioned, and to affect kids in poverty. And so, unfortunately, you guys are the only ones who can really put the pressure on the districts, as far as I can tell. And I just hope, and I know you guys are doing a lot of great work there, but just, I hope, I know it's uncomfortable because these districts are the same ones that pay our contracts and you need to get along with, but these gaps are not acceptable. And I don't think it's asking questions. I think it's eliminating the gaps. And I hope you guys do everything you can and saying like, hey, District X, you got extra money for English learners. You got extra money for your foster youth. What'd you do with it? Why isn't it getting better? And then, look for a district that, so I just want to keep emphasizing that because these gaps are, they can change and they have to change. And we've made some improvement, but not nearly enough.
Are there any other questions from the board? Trustee Camacho.
Thank you for this data. I don't have questions on, I think the data you presented exactly, but some clarification. So differentiated assistance, the eligibility is based on the results that came out in December, would determine who's eligible for differentiated assistance for 24, 25.
Yes, and something that changes this year is districts are now eligible for support on a 2-year
Okay.
cycle. So districts that are identified from this dashboard will be eligible for assistance in the, this year through the December of, what would that be? It would be 26. Yeah.
Oh, so it goes across academic years. So their DA eligibility starts in January and will go through December of the following. Okay.
Yeah, and that 2-year change was made because the feedback from us through the county superintendents to the state was that, by the time we get the identification and we begin working with folks, like the tests that are being given in 3 months are showing up on the next dashboard. So we don't really have time to have as much influence as we would want to. So I think this new sort of 2-year plan is going to actually allow us to do better work and really see our work better reflected in subsequent dashboards.
Yeah, thank you for the explanation, because that was the basis of my question. Is like, if the results change from year to year and they're already no longer eligible for DA, like, how do we know what worked? So thank you for explaining that. I want to be a little sneaky. So I know you said that for the EL data that you presented, EL students data that you presented, that we're not allowed to include RFEP students in those changes. But do we have the raw data to be able to present that data and then add RFEP back in to that data? Because then we can just at least see what kind of difference are we talking about? How many students are being reclassified? Because I think it's good to know both those things, the data with the RFEP and the data without, which is what we presented.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And I think I might run some stuff to see if I can do that. The indicator though I've been really watching personally and hasn't put it up here. And I think the state is beginning to watch this as well, is the at-risk and long-term English learner, because that incorporates a few things of both time in schools, but also you're not eligible to be included in those two groups if you are making progress on the LPAC. So it's really students who have been in schools for 4 years or more for at-risk and 6 years or more for long-term English learner, and not making year-to-year progress and not performing in the highest level on the LPAC. So that's the number I really watch, because those are the students that I'm thinking we've had them for 4 years. Yep. They're not making progress. We need to have a conversation about what's happening there. And then, so that kind of looks at it from the other direction. And so now it's not a big deal to you're not penalized for RFEPing students, because you really are just looking at the students who, hopefully that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. And I think that it's been, the last time I saw long-term English learner data was when Dr. Walke presented here in this room. That was probably 7 years ago. That was the last time I saw presented data specifically on long-term English learners progress. And so I would love it if that's available, for that to be a part of the conversations going further. I also think it's really interesting data. I won't comment on it, but really interesting data on students that were born here that are long-term English learners. I don't know that we talk about that very much. It's not to comment on it, but it is very interesting data. And then my last question is kind of trying to understand where we're going, because I know we had the disruption in the years, and it sounds like this 22-23 data is the data that we're really going to use as good data, because that's the first one that's high participation rate, all those things. So if I do the math on that though, to see progress over cohorts, we'll start seeing it for the third graders that tested last year, and we'll see that every year, that cohort's progress. But to see the progress of, say, the eighth graders in this good data from 22-23, we're not going to see them again until December 2026, right? Because they
Yes.
took it as eighth
Yes.
graders. I'm just trying to wrap my head around how we're going to see kind of longitudinal data, and it sounds like it's not going to be for a while now because of
Yeah.
those 3 missing years.
Yeah, and I would say specifically for academic data, there is that sort of 9th and 10th year grade black hole that
Yeah.
like is a little bit tricky to navigate. And I don't know if any of us outside of districts have good answers for that one. Every district has some sort of district-wide or common assessments that they
Yeah.
use that they're able to see that data, but oftentimes it's not something that we have access to aggregate.
That would be really interesting data. And I only say that, and you don't have to respond to this one. It's because once December 2026 comes, just like you said with the data, like those kids are gone by the time we really start looking at that data. And so how are we able to impact them backwards? It's frustrating, but it's the
Yeah.
data we have, right?
Yeah, it is one of those challenges that really well-structured assessment data does take a lot of testing time, which is ultimately like a big reason why we eliminated those 9th and 10th grade test years. And always trying to balance like how much of that sort of high quality sum of information do we need versus how much instructional time are we going to take to do it. And then, so yeah, I think that like, if we talk to the high school districts, they're not using the CASP data for their 11th graders in their inquiry work the same way that our elementary and middle schools are. And I think it is because of that 1 year gap. And I think that's why they have spent, and I know this is the case definitely for Sequoia and for San Mateo Union. They spend a lot of time being thoughtful about what common assessments they're going to use, what oftentimes it's who they're going to partner with in order to get the right sort of information so that they can continually follow up and ask questions and respond to things.
Yeah, and it would be exciting to see, because I know inter-district MOUs happen. So like feeders into their high school districts have some data sharing agreements and kind of just tracking that information. I think it's be great if we can get those kind of MOUs for a countywide thing. It's like, what do we know we're doing in our high schools in that 9th and 10th grade year? Because we can be looking at that data and share best practices together. I would also say from a parent perspective of, we did a lot to move away from what NCLB did to student experience with testing and family experience with testing. There are still some remnants of that from the language we get from the classroom, from classroom teachers about how they talk about the tests. And so I guess that's just a comment then, right? It's hard to move folks away from a number once the number's there and the language they use backwards to everyone prepare for the test. And the tests aren't important, but the tests are important. Everyone show up at it. I don't think I'm saying anything there, so I'll just end there. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the board or questions? Trustee Gerard.
I had a question about the absenteeism. And do we know which groups of students are the highest in missing school? I mean, do we have any idea, or is it just a round number?
So it is pretty evenly spread, although I will say that Pacific Islanders really jump out in a lot of school districts as having much higher chronic absenteeism rates. So we're picking out individual student groups. That is the one that stood out to me when I was sort of looking at it, but it is high across the board in a lot of cases.
Okay, because I was wondering if there was any coalition between the high absenteeism and the issues with our English learners. And part of the issue was that they weren't in school. So that was why I was asking the question.
Yeah, I haven't noticed English learners really sticking out any more so, but generally speaking, most of our student groups are in the orange or red category. So chronic absenteeism is across the board really high. So it certainly does have an impact, but how much, it's nobody is like, no, English learners aren't significantly sticking out of, a broad, very high and high rate sort of collection.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Oh, yes, Bethany.
It was great to hear all this data about how students are doing, so thank you very much for taking the time to put this presentation together. I have a few questions for you. For starters, what were pre-COVID absenteeism rates like?
They were much lower than this. I would say that most of our schools did center around that probably 5 to 10% range is where most of our student groups and most of our schools were in. So yeah, pre-COVID, it was much lower.
Got it. Do you know why absenteeism rates haven't returned to how they were before?
We have some hypotheses, and I would say that like I probably don't know quite as much as my colleague Executive Director Dardanelle knows, because some of their work, a lot of their work this year was in chronic absenteeism in collaboration with a lot of the departments here. We hosted some workshops. We worked very intensively with particular districts and schools, and that intensive work was really about let's figure out why there's a chronic absenteeism issue here. Like I will share that in the sort of data dive that we were working within a school district, they found out that like, oh, it's really centered at this one school. And okay, now we're going to go work with this one school. And so there is oftentimes unique conditions in different places, but a big part of improvement science is really like getting into the context of the particular students that you're serving, and then working hard to understand and ask questions like you're asking, okay, why is this really happening before we start trying to like provide remedies.
Okay. And I noticed that for the CCI graph, Filipino and Pacific Islander individuals are categorized differently from Asians. And to my knowledge, they are considered Asian. So what factored into the decision to have them be a separate group?
So California sets up the sort of which student groups get aggregated in which ways. And as students are enrolled, they will fill in information about their race, and every school district collects that, and it's much more granular than the buckets that are shown here. And then California decides in conjunction with certain federal rules which student groups are going to get aggregated together and which ones remain separate. I don't know of all of the social and historical reasons why those particular decisions were made. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense, sometimes it doesn't. One of my, and I if you'll forgive me, I might make my sort of Trustee Lempert comment here. Aggregating Asian is sometimes really problematic because at one point, a couple of years ago, the highest performing student group, individual race code student group in the state was Taiwanese students. And the lowest individual performing student group in the state was Laotian students. And they were both aggregated as Asian. And so there is sometimes stuff that we get lost because we're having to make aggregations. And I will say that they don't always make perfect sense, but this is what we're given by the state.
Got it. That makes sense. So I understand if you don't have any control over this, but I just wanted to say that having Filipino and Pacific Islander individuals be categorized as separately just from Asians feels a bit exclusionary. I feel that if the Asian category indicated that they were from a specific geographical region rather than like like Philippines or Pacific Islander, that would be more inclusive and not in a sense deprive Filipino and Pacific Islander individuals of their identity, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's about all I have to say. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I have one. Mine is, I actually had not ever seen the equity report on the dashboard.
Oh.
And so I'm curious, I've looked at it a little bit more since I thought of my, that I want to ask about this. And I see that the student groups are indicated. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and how, when it got there and kind of like how it's used or, how it's determined and what we can take away from it? Because I'm trying to
Yes. So
understand it.
I think they added it probably in the last year before the pandemic is what I think. But that means that it's probably been there for 1 year, right? Because we didn't have a dashboard and then we didn't have colors. So, I think that as you say, like it's been on there for a while, but we might not have had many dashboards with it because of various reasons. But it was meant to really help school districts engaging with their communities around asking better questions in preparation for developing their LCAP and some of their local strategic planning, because we did see that really the dashboard is primarily a tool for that sort of community engagement piece around the LCAP and planning. So representing all of the student groups that sort of at a glance, so that you can see not just, okay, well, here's the overall all students color, but like, here's what's going on with each individual students without having to click through to different charts. And of course you can click through and see more detail for each of them, but the at a glance to really understand how differences are being created by schools was something that the state, I think correctly felt was a priority. And when they did the redesign a few years ago.
Okay, so it's essentially, there's certain groups who are doing well and certain ones that aren't. So the differentiation between those, the groups is the heart of it.
Yeah, and then you kind of having that lead into more questions, right? Like, it's great to say like, oh yeah, we're in the green or we're in the blue, but like, and then saying like, yeah, but we have 3 student groups in orange and red. Like, this means that it's not all good, and we need to like ask some questions about like why school is working for some students and why it's not working for some students.
Thank you. That was helpful. All right. Are there any other board questions? Okay. I'll just make a quick comment. Everyone might have noticed that we've moved public comment to be after the presentation and after our comments and questions. And so that's why, if you haven't noticed so far, that's where it is. The public, I guess, when more people are attending or people are asking questions, they'll get used to that. The question is if there is any public comment online or in person for this item. I don't see any hands, but no. Okay. All right. There's no action to take on this item. Thank you very much for the presentation. Okay. So we are on to item 8A. Kevin Bultema, Deputy Superintendent, Business Services Division, and Tammy Moore, Associate Superintendent, Human Resources, will present the public disclosure of the collective bargaining agreement between the San Mateo County Superintendent of Schools and the San Mateo County Educators Association, SMCEA, for 2023-2024. Deputy Superintendent Bultema and Associate Superintendent Moore.
Good evening, Board President Bonini, members of the board, and Superintendent McGee. Deputy Superintendent Bultema and I are here tonight to inform you that the San Mateo County Office of Education has concluded our reopener contract negotiations with the San Mateo County Educators Association. We have reached an agreement regarding compensation and benefits, reflecting the 3rd year of the current 3-year contract. And Deputy Superintendent Bultema will now present information about the public disclosure.
We did provide an estimate of the cost associated with this agreement. The agreement itself is for a 6% salary increase effective July 1 of 2023. We're also increasing the health and welfare contribution, both for individuals from the current amount of $1,275 up to $1,300. But the bargaining unit had an interest and we shared it. So looking at offsetting some of the burden of costs for employee plus, or if you had a family. So we're actually offering for employee plus one, a county office contribution rate of $1,550 per month, effective January 1st. The total cost impact of this agreement, we estimate to be $479,944. That is an estimate, but it's reflected in the document that we showed you that also is signed by Superintendent McGee and myself, that we believe that the organization can afford this agreement.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Yes, should also mention there were two other items in the negotiated settlement that didn't have a dollar impact or required a budget. One, an additional day for our extended school year teachers, that if they worked the full session, they received an extra day of sick time. And then we also had some flexibility regarding personal days related to mental health. So those were also included in the agreement, but didn't have a dollar impact, or were not included in this disclosure.
Wonderful. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any comments from the public? Don't see any.
Chelsea?
Oh, yes. Oh, sorry, Mr.
No,
Cannon.
it was not your
Yes.
fault. I just didn't have my thoughts together.
Okay.
So every time you guys reach an agreement, I think, thank you. And I know it's a huge job and it's a major factor in people's morale. And so just congratulations and great to have that behind you and get going on the next challenge. Huh? Thanks.
Are there any other comments? Okay, my apologies, Mr. Cannon. Okay, then there is no action to take on this item. Thank you very much. Item 8B is superintendent comments. Superintendent McGee, do you have any comments this evening?
I do have a few. Today is notable because Governor Newsom released the 2024 proposed budget for the year. And there has been grim projections about the budget. The Legislative Analyst's Office back in December had projected that California would see a $68 billion deficit in the budget, which is quite large. The governor today, in his projected budget, his deficit was at 37.9 billion, much lower than the LAO, which is not unusual that they are far apart in their numbers. But the other, I guess, good news in that is it appears that there's a real effort to protect education funding in this original today's budget, which will change a lot between now and June. But the only cut proposed by the governor to education was to delay the 25-26 $550 million for the preschool and TK full day kindergarten facilities grant. So that money had not yet been released. It was projected to be released because as districts increase the numbers of classes that they have to support transitional kindergarten, they don't have enough space, right? So there had to be a parallel fund coming for that facilities grant. And that is the cut that came out today in the original proposed budget. There's a few other dollars, I would say, being moved around in different ways because we saved some over here, so we're moving some over here kind of thing. But I think there's a little bit of a sigh of relief today at the end of the day that it wasn't a complete slash and burn on education today. That may still be a battle ahead. I do want to put back on your radar that on Tuesday, January 30th, Capital Advisors will be here in this room providing their first budget workshop. That is from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock on that Tuesday. They do a great job of covering both the federal legislation, and then they kind of give you the behind the scenes stories as much as they can. So you can sort of predict what's coming. The other thing I want to point out today is I think most of you are aware that on Saturday, the county will bid farewell to Supervisor Don Horsley in a celebration of life service at the College of San Mateo. It's open to the public. The event is from 1 o'clock to 4 p.m. and it will be in the like the fourth floor of Building 10 at the college, where many of you have been for many other events. Unfortunately, I won't be there. I feel sad about that, but I think Don approves the fact that I'm going to go celebrate my granddaughter's 3rd birthday. And I think he would be okay with that. I do think it will be a notable, remarkable service because he was such a remarkable man, and I hope that many of you are able to attend. But to the larger public, it is open to the public, so anyone is welcome. And then finally, I learned, actually I have 2 more quick things. There is going to be a special event that I want to specifically invite the county board to attend if they'd wish to. This is a special event that has been planned between our expanded learning and community partnerships team, Ruby McCarregg, here with the San Mateo County Superior Court, as well as I think the county attorney's office. And it is a very cool experience that will happen again on Tuesday, January 30th, but it will be largely in the morning from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. It's in recognition of Fred Korematsu Day, and it will take place at the Hall of Justice, 400 County Center. And the San Mateo County judges and the county attorneys and our county office staff who are organizing will all be in attendance and will directly engage with approximately 100 students who are going to come to the courthouse on a field trip. They'll be in the courtroom. From 10:15 to 11:15, the attorneys and the judges are going to provide a reenactment of the Korematsu and his fight for justice Supreme Court case. So it will be with a script, it will be acted out. Students will be sitting in the audience. I think it will be very, very impactful. And then they will serve the students lunch and then afterwards debrief the reenactment. So if you would like to attend to see the reenactment from 10:15 to 11:15, I will have Jennifer send something out tomorrow with the flyer, and you can respond whether you'd like to attend. But it's a special invitation to the County Board of Education too. I know John's team is very involved in it. I don't know, John, if you want to add anything that I left out. Great. Of course, next Monday, the country will celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I do want to say happy birthday to Reverend King. It would have been his 95th birthday. And there's never been a more important time that we invoke his spirit and his philosophies in carrying forth our work civically. I think it's on your calendar already, but just a reminder that on Friday, January 19th at noon, here at the county office is the 17th District PTA Luncheon. It's the superintendents who attend give a little 2-minute, supposed to be a little 2-minute update on what's going on in their districts. But want to make sure that you're all welcome to attend. And if you would like to attend, you should let Jennifer know, because there's a little registration process for us to go through for that. And finally, just happy to be back at work. I came back on Monday, scaffolding my days, building my stamina, and hope to be kind of back in full swing by February. I've got a lot of activities building already on my calendar, so I don't think I really have a choice at this point now that I'm back. So just happy to be back. And I do want to say to all of the County Office of Education and the board that the outpouring of support and kindness and care was overwhelming and astounding from every corner of the organization. So very appreciated. This is a special place. So I will conclude with that.
Thank you very much, Superintendent McGee. Okay, we are now on to item 9A, where we received a communication, but this item is board subcommittees and board liaisons or representatives, I guess, in some instances, will provide a brief, hopefully, a summary of the work that has been going on recently, if any, and anything that might be on the horizon for the coming year. This is not intended to be a report of your last meetings or things like that. It is really intended to be if you were sharing it with somebody who doesn't have any idea about what this committee is for, why it exists, you have to go into all the detail, but why it is important and exists, and the type of work that happens. There will be some, I think, some shifting of people on different committees, and just intended to give, for instance, newer trustees like Trustee Torres an idea of what happens. And also our student liaison. There are a couple of committees that in the past, well, at least one that I know of, the legislative, that we've invited potentially to have student participation. And I think they don't all lend themselves to that, but I was thinking probably something like maybe policy or legislation, something like that. But that it could be anything else. So so that is the goal. So we'll literally just go down the list. I think you all, we have the list. I'll just lead us down it. And if you are the chair, or even if you're not the chair and you have something to share with the rest of the board and everyone else around that committee, we would love to know that. And then we'll move into figuring out who is on them. So the first one on my list is the superintendent salary subcommittee. And as I go down them, I'm going to just state who is currently on them so that we know, and so everybody, I guess you all have it, but I'll just say it for the record. Okay, so superintendent salary subcommittee is Trustee Gerard, Camacho, and Lempert. Would one of you like to give us a brief summary?
Trustee
Gerard.
I'll speak to that.
Thank you.
Traditionally, the president of the board is usually the chair of the superintendent salary committee. So for the last 2 years, I was in that position, but I would certainly be willing to step aside if you would like to take over as chair of that committee.
Thank you. What does that committee do?
They look at a whole lot of criteria, and maybe Mr. Camacho would like to comment on this because he really is the expert on all of the numbers and criteria. Would you like to to do that, Mr. Camacho?
Sure. The superintendent salary committee I think for a lot of time was, or at least for the time I've been on the board, kind of really ad hoc, like we're going to call it together to look at the superintendent's salary. And that usually came with like a proposal. We would evaluate that, have conversations. Over the last 5 years that I've been a member of it, it's evolved a little bit more to an ongoing story. And kind of an ongoing strategy of how we address that, taking into account local factors, taking into account the structure of pay within the county office itself. So it's more of a living committee that picks up work now as opposed to just ad hoc. It's pretty fascinating information. So if you can't tell, I would like to stay on it.
How frequently does this committee meet?
Typically ahead of the requests, which usually come through in October, November. Is that
Yeah,
when they come
it's
through?
a September,
Yeah.
October process so that it can come to the board by November
Yeah, something and that's dictated by our
Ed code.
policy. Yeah, by
Yeah.
Ed code.
and board policy.
And so it has a season in which we're meeting pretty regularly, sometimes just by phone, sometimes, yeah.
And sometimes you meet in addition to that. So I have a lot of
Yeah.
questions, I guess, because it sounds like I might be the one going into it.
Yeah, and it's
Alright.
usually just for that 2-3 month period, and then it goes dormant for a while.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Are there any other comments on that? Okay. The second one on the list is the Interdistrict Attendance Appeal Subcommittee. And currently, I think it has 2 members. I think it's also Trustee Gerard and Trustee Camacho.
We did have 3.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
maybe
when
Mr. Ross.
trustee Ross
Yeah.
left, then we were down to 2.
The Interdistrict Attendance Bill Subcommittee hasn't met in 2 years. And one of there were policy recommendations that were made by council. And so those were implemented over a couple of years. And so we closed the committee and then we reopened the committee because we went through another spurt of interdistrict transfer appeals. And there was desire from the board to look at the language around how we approach them overall. With us, without not having had interdistrict transfer appeals recently, it kind of falls off the radar because we don't think about it. But then we have one and it's like, we really need to talk about this again. So now in this downtime would probably be a good time to really revisit that before we get back into the season of interdistrict appeals.
Okay. And there are policies and then there are, and Trustee Lamford had his hand up.
Oh, go ahead.
There are policies and then there's the actual handbook, which is separate. I think it's actually a policy. It's like a board reg or something like that, but I don't know what it's called now. Anyway, Mr. Lamford.
Yeah, I just wanted to give an even longer historical perspective on that committee, because when I served it, the committee met with several superintendents around the county to hear their complaints about how we were acting, and it was one of the best sessions. It was, back and forth. I'm not sure how much we really changed anything, but I think we heard. So I don't think that's needed because we really haven't that many, but that committee can serve that purpose where they have more of a dialogue, obviously not in an official session where we can hear what the school districts think.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
So
Mr.
just
Cannon.
to add on to what Ted said, I thought that the thing that came out of that the best was the superintendents realized that we took it very seriously and that we were not haphazardly overturning their decisions.
Oh, yes, that sounds like it would be. Trustee Alvaro.
Thank you. I was also on that little group. And I thought what was really valuable, we did change the way we did the handbook.
Yes.
I thought that was really important.
Yep.
Because we didn't want our policies to be obscure. We wanted to be transparent, but we realized in this conversation, there were some things that were confusing. And there were some things that simply weren't stated. And we did make a few changes. And I think the biggest was the change in the way the handbook was presented. So that the handbook is an outgrowth of the policies. It is not itself a policy, but it contains our policy so that people can see what it is we're looking at.
Thank you. Trustee Camacho.
One other charge I would recommend coming back is to that point of the meetings that were held. There have been a lot of changes to superintendencies and board members since those really productive meetings. And I'm already starting to hear just in my role as being out there, of misconceptions of how interdistrict transfer appeals work. So it might be a good time for that committee to revisit that as well.
Probably everybody is.
I think it should.
Okay, that's so helpful. Thank you all. Any other comments? Okay, the next one is the YMCA Partnership Subcommittee. And the current members are Trustee Alvaro, Camacho, and Cannon. Would any of you like to? Trustee Alvaro.
So having been on this committee in its various forms for a very, very long time, it was originally our outdoor ed subcommittee. And then as the partnership with the YMCA evolved, so did the committee, so that it was really about working with our partners, the Y, in how to talk about developing the program and continuing the program when they wanted some go ahead to do certain kinds of projects that we were going to be asked to help fund. That's when we sat down and really talked. And when there were things that our staff really wanted, that the Y needed to hear about, that's when we sat down and talked. It's been ongoing. We haven't met mainly because of with the pandemic. I mean, it's just been ridiculous, right? We are going to have an update meeting with the Y on the 26th of this month. So we are going to actually be able to talk to them again. There's been a lot of changes, and it was helpful because, and sort of like with the superintendents, none of the ones we met with that committee are here anymore. So the Y, it's been similar. You know, we've been consistent, but there's been so many changes, and it's been really helpful to continue to have these conversations. So outdoor is a really important program for
Absolutely.
us. So
Thank you. Does anyone else? Oh, yes, Mr. Cannon.
Just to add, Susan, I think that we've been pleased, fair enough to say, with the leadership at the Y and their willingness to work with us on this.
yeah, I definitely think it's been moving in the right direction for the last couple of years. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yes, absolutely.
With who in the YMCA do you meet with? Like who's part of that on their end?
God, I gotta remember their names. I
Like
can't
not
remember.
names, but maybe like their titles or.
It is the CEO of the YMCA of San Francisco. So it is the top leadership.
Right. And as
Um,
weird as that sounds, that it's the Y of San Francisco that owns Jones Gulch. not
They
the one in San Mateo.
cover San Mateo County as part of their jurisdiction.
Right. It just sounds weird when we talk about, we meet with the San Francisco people.
Yeah,
because
and then there's also other leadership in the Y that directly are responsible for Camp Jones Gulch and the camp. And then sometimes construction managers that know all the technical information about the building projects and things like that.
Yeah, we've even had the architect on come to the committee on at least one occasion, so we could talk about the new cabins and that sort of thing.
And just to clarify, the meeting on the 26th is just a quick meeting with Kevin and me to update you on what's been done so far on the cabin
okay.
construction. And then we're going to set up a meeting to follow that so that you guys are informed
That's perfect. I just
before we go
misunderstood
meet with the Y.
invitation.
Yeah, the second
thank
meeting
you.
will be with the Y.
Just you. Okay.
Great, thank you for all that information. Okay, the next one is the legislative subcommittee. And currently it's me and Trustee Camacho who are on that. And I don't know if you want to say anything, Hector, but we haven't really met for the last year. But generally do you want to say, do you want to?
Sure. What I'll add is I think one of the reasons we haven't met is connected to, we've seen a stepped up advocacy happening at the California County Superintendents and the former CCBE level So we were really following a lot of their lead and then bringing legislation that we saw. One of the challenges we encountered, just so you know, with this meeting is how the legislative calendar works. And so while something might be introduced at a really early stage, we could call a meeting and then the legislation could completely change by the time it was up for a vote, and that could happen within 2 weeks or a week. And so it is a little more, I would think, if going forward, what this committee could be is about like, how are we responding to these action alerts that we're seeing through organizations that are helping us with legislation? And if there's anything that we are aware of, we can talk about that. But I think one of our last meetings we discussed was when we get those action alerts, would the board be comfortable with authorizing the board president to sign on behalf alongside the superintendent a letter of support in those really quick moments? I think that's where we were headed toward.
Yeah, that was part of it. We also had met with the Capital Advisors, right? Because they're obviously one of the organizations that keeps us surprised. And then, you know, we had a lot of assistance from Patricia Love and also Superintendent McGee, and kind of staying apprised and then bringing letters to the board. But as Hector noted, sometimes the timing, we tried to figure it out, but it's a lot of work actually on that committee. So having kind of following what others are doing is probably a good idea. And I think you're right. That's why we didn't really meet. It was a committee that we attempted to have one of our prior student liaisons join us, but we didn't end up meeting. So in any case, I don't know if, you know, Bethany's listening. So if you have any questions. But anyway, okay, so that's legislative. Board policy subcommittee is currently myself, Trustee Alvaro and Trustee Camacho. I think we all know a lot about that because we've done a lot of policy. We've gone through the gamut and put that in place. And we formed it because we had some questions about some transitions in the policies. And we have some new procedures for review. I think the plan is under those procedures is for that committee to stay in place and then to work with the staff and with superintendent to understand, you know, the changes that are coming down through CSBA and then or any other policy issues. So I think that's basically what we've done. Does anyone have anything to add? Okay.
I would also just add to that it's a pretty active, that's a pretty active committee.
Yeah.
Because we get quarterly updates that which we haven't had in the past. This will be the first year that we're really going to roll with the quarterly updates. So it's kind of going to be a sort of an ongoing process. It will never go dormant, as Trustee Camacho described on the other one.
Yeah, so there's that one. The Workforce Housing Subcommittee it's currently myself, Trustee Gerard, and Trustee Torres. Do one of you want to? Well, I guess we probably have had some updates, but anyway, a brief description of why it exists. So, for instance, Bethany can.
We're partnering and working with Heart of San Mateo to provide housing for teachers and staff. And that was recently created, and we're still in the process of moving forward with those plans.
And I think one of the purposes for having, even though we have an MOU signed, one of the reasons to have it continue, right, is that things can come up, and if they find a property, we don't think they have yet, but something like that we could, as a committee, meet in a more expedited basis than having a special board meeting or something like that.
Yeah, and once there is a property identified and purchased, then the committee would work together with staff to set priorities for who gets what and what kinds of costs you want to apply to different units.
The subsidization. and things
The
like that.
subsidies and that kind of thing, how you want to distribute that. So that would be, once that's in place, that would probably be like a yearly update where we get data from Hart on what's the occupancy of the building, and then here's the savings for this year. How do you want to apply the rents? So But during the setup of all that, once that property gets purchased, it'll be a pretty busy committee for a while, I think. Until those things kind of become routine.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. And then the last subcommittee on our list is the Gateway Subcommittee. Current members of that are Trustee Alvaro, myself, and Trustee Gerard. And we are engaging in the process that's set out through with Superintendent McGee with the National Equity Project. We're staying apprised of that, participating that's what we've done. We've also, just based upon the history of Gateway, we have, had other discussions and meetings just to bring ourselves up to speed so that we can make sure that the board understands all kind of the pulse of the community, let's just say that. But that's also happening through the National Equity Project. So that is that. And then I think the representative roles kind of speak for themselves. I don't know if anybody wants to speak about them. Maybe I might wonder if Mr. Lempert might share with the representative role that you have of the
Well-
County Committee for School District Organization.
It sounds more important than it is because the Committee on School District Organization is very important. And that's the 11-person body that does trustee areas, that meets on school district organizations. That's a very important body. This group that I'm on is one member from each school board in the county. We meet once a year to go over the membership, and then we get a great lecture from the county council's office on the role of the on what they do. So we're not really we're the liaison. We're making sure that there's members and there. But that
Okay.
that committee is important. The liaison committee is more just to hear.
Yeah, you're just
That's fine.
keeping, and this is the role of those representative liaisons is really just so that we know what's going
Yeah.
on, if there's anything. so that
And
we
in
can
terms of
report
the
back.
membership of that committee too. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, so for the LCAP, actually, have we always had one person for LCAP? I think we have. Trustee Gerard, you've been serving in,
It's been one.
and
last few
that's the process, right? That happens, as the LCAP is developed and you meet with.
Yes, I sat in
meetings.
on some of the meetings, and then also I met with it was who did I meet?
Is it Chris Schaus and
Chris
Sharon
Schau.
Notch?
Yes. And she went over a lot of the information. It was very informative.
Okay.
And I had lots of questions, so.
Right, and then that also obviously the whole thing comes back, all that comes back to the board in stages, but Trustee Gerard's there to kind of be our ears on the ground. The SMCSBA, I've served in that role for the last couple of years, and really that's a whole board, San Mateo County School Boards Association. Trustee Gerard's also on that as the county representative
Mhm.
for I don't even know,
Delegate
or
assembly.
delegate assembly,
Yeah.
and then I'm our representative anyway, so we go to those meetings and then we help plan the events and things like that. The Coalition for Safe Schools and Communities representative, we have two. We have Trustee Cannon and Trustee Gerard currently. And is there anything to share about that other than you attend the events and meetings and things like that?
The only thing I would say is that, I view my membership on these committees as kind of an oversight role. And going to this now since, what year was it, Nancy? 2012, we started with this Beyond Newtown.
2013.
2013. The organization has just been solid, and the coming together of different agencies has been very encouraging. I don't think we ever had such a great partnership with law enforcement. So the meeting that we went to was encouraging, uplifting, enthusiastic, and well done.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. So being a representative of the board there.
Mhm.
right? And then there's two more, Big Lift representatives. So currently it's also Mr. Cannon and Trustee Cannon and Trustee Camacho. And do you go to the Big Lift meetings? Do you do other things?
Well, yes. Nancy, I don't remember. I went to one.
Yeah,
Were there
the
others?
big lift this last year was going through a strategic planning process, so it was sort of on hold. And there is going to be a big convening in February, March. They're trying to figure out a date. So that would be the kind of thing that the representatives would be invited to, and those will start to happen again more frequently now that the big lift is healthy and strong and in its new configuration.
Well, and I would just add to that, healthy and strong was my impression from our meeting that day. Is that what we were working on the strategic plan that day? Down
Yeah.
at the Zuckerberg Center?
Oh, Sobrato.
So,
Oh, yeah, that was the, not last year, it was the year.
ooh,
It was saying goodbye to Carol Groom in her role.
well, at any rate, that day I was very impressed again by, being such a solid organization. The funding was good. The leadership in the group was terrific. County offices participation was solid and looked to for leadership. And I thought the atmosphere and enthusiasm in the room was terrific. So seemed very healthy to me.
Wonderful, thank you. And the last one is the representative to the SELPA, the Special Education Local Plan Area. And I've been serving in that role for the last 2 years since we formed that or created that representative role. And in that capacity, I usually try to attend the community advisory committee meetings, which are held about for a year. I try to go to the SELPA governing board meetings. I haven't been to one for a little while, but I think there's one coming up if they're not. Maybe
Probably, there's
Friday.
usually one coming up.
Yeah, they're quarterly or something. Just to keep us apprised in what's going on with the SELPA. And also one of the things that I've been focused on is trying to get more people to come to those meetings. That's been a long-standing thing that I've been working on in terms of trying to get the boards to appoint members to the CAC, which is the process under the Ed Code, which is the recruitment process is it needs some attention. That's one of the other things, but that's that's another part perhaps. Okay, so those are all the things, all the committees and the representative roles. Let's see. So that I don't know if there's any public comment or any other comments about those, but I think we can probably, that doesn't have any action. The next item is 9B. And then, so for 9B, we've following the regular practice of making annual subcommittee assignments at our January meeting, which is now our first one. We discussed that, we will discuss this. We can follow up on these conversations we've already had, right? And then figure out who will be in the positions for 24. I wanted to thank each member of the board for individually sharing your preferences for committees and liaisons. I reached out individually to each person. And based upon your input, I have proposed some assignments, and there are still some gaps though. So I'm going to go through them again quickly so we don't have, have too much longer. And propose a couple of changes, mostly based upon the fact that certain people didn't want to stay in certain positions or requested a change. And then, of course, we have Trustee Torres, who was serving on one committee. And so we want to get him serving on more committees. Fortunately, there were openings. So if there are only 2 for some of them, that is okay. But if you are interested, if there's an opening, just let me know. So I'm just going to again go through them in order, say who I'm proposing to either stay or join. And then if there's an opening, or if you don't want to stay in that position, that's fine. And then we can figure it out from there. I think we'll just proceed. So I'm starting at the top again, the ad hoc superintendent salary subcommittee would remain with Trustee Lempert, Trustee Camacho, and then I would join that committee, and Trustee Gerard would not be on the committee. So it will be Trustee Bonini, Trustee Camacho, Trustee Lempert. And I think that was aligned with what was requested. Okay, for the Interdistrict Attendance Appeal Committee, I am proposing, based upon the input, Trustee Torres, Trustee Gerard, and myself. So, Yes.
Are you noting who's chair now, or are you going to wait until later?
So trustee Camacho was serving as chair according to my chart. So I suppose we would have to determine. Who
It's
can
fine
chair?
to do now or later. I'm filling out my chart. so-
Trustee Gerard, would you mind being chair?
I'll be chair.
Okay, thank you.
So that does not include trustee Camacho?
Not,
that-
not trustee
Not,
Camacho.
okay.
All right, the YMCA Partnership Subcommittee would remain with trustee Alvaro and trustee Cannon, and then trustee Torres will take trustee Camacho's space for that subcommittee. The legislative subcommittee I will stay on the legislative subcommittee. I believe trustee Camacho is okay staying with that subcommittee. And we have an opening on that subcommittee if anybody wants to join us, if we want to have 3 members. Is anyone interested in joining the legislative subcommittee? Trustee Torres? Okay, anyone else? All right, so we'll put trustee Torres. All right, so legislative will be trustee Bonini, trustee Camacho, trustee Torres. And also Bethany, if you're interested in any of them as we go along, feel free to let us know. We will welcome you to do that if you wish.
Okay, sounds good. And
Okay.
just to clarify, what time are the meetings at?
So usually they aren't set at a certain time, but we do, and they're rarely in my experience a regular time. But we do get help from the county office staff and from Superintendent McGee to coordinate a time. So we would find a time that would be that would work for everybody on the committee.
Okay, sounds good. And I'm pretty interested in the legislative subcommittee.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah. And is it okay if I mention another idea right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was wondering about the possibility of establishing a sustainability subcommittee. So I know that very many people are passionate about sustainability, and it's an issue that's inevitably going to affect us all unless we take active measures to address it. So would anyone be interested in that? Would that be possible?
I think that we can do that. What we probably would need to do is, and I'm going to ask Superintendent McGee, I think we would need to do it at a future meeting, or maybe we wouldn't if anybody's interested. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a question for.
I think it's okay if the board identified a new subcommittee that they wanted
As
to
we're-
assign
Okay.
now, but
Okay.
also the subcommittees can be formed at any point during the year
is true.
as long as it's on the agenda.
Okay. Is the board interested in forming a sustainability subcommittee? Any comment on that?
I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Is anyone interested in serving on that subcommittee if we create it? I think we could, or even a representative. It sounds like Bethany would be interested in, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so maybe.
Chair Bonini, I was trying to
Sure.
clarify whether you're
Yeah.
ascertaining interest for something that might be agendized in a future meeting, or are you intending to do it now? There isn't anything agendized with respect to
It's not on-
establishing a
Yeah, it's not
subcommittee.
on our list. Yeah, so generally, I guess if you believe we would need to agendize it, we can just, we can do that. We can propose to do that maybe
Yeah.
at the
Yeah,
next.
I-
meeting.
In the past on
Yeah,
this,
but I'm
if
not sure.
there's been a subcommittee that needed to be dropped, it happened.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
if you wanted to add, if the board wanted to add a committee, they did it at this. But it's also easy to agendize this and have a larger conversation about it.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nippoy. So we can, so we'll propose to add it to a future agenda, potentially maybe on the 24th, and then everybody can think about whether they want to join that subcommittee. Okay, sounds good. Thank you for the idea, Bethany. Okay, the next one is policy subcommittee. Currently, it is myself, trustee Alvaro, and trustee Camacho. And I propose that, say I will stay on the policy subcommittee. Trustee Alvaro, I believe, would like to stay on the policy subcommittee. And Trustee Gerard, are you willing to join that subcommittee
In place of Mr.
in place of
Camacho?
Mr. Camacho?
Does Mr. Camacho want to stay on that committee?
I am comfortable if you'd like to be on that committee instead. I would not be offended.
Well, I wouldn't be offended if you stayed on it either, so.
Well, let's not fight over the policy.
So it's really up to you because you know, you've done an excellent job in,
Oh, I don't know about that.
well, I think you have. So if you would like to stay on that committee, I certainly would step aside.
That, just for clarification, that's the one where when you all get the packages. That's okay. Yeah, sure.
You
I
want to
can
stay?
do that. That's fine.
You're going to stay. Okay. All right. Thank you. So that will be the status quo for that one. The Workforce Housing Subcommittee. Oh, and I think that the chair positions will stay as well. The Workforce Housing Subcommittee, we don't have the chair noted, but okay, the current one is, current members, it's getting later, is myself, Trustee Gerard, and Trustee Torres. And I propose that it would stay the same based upon interest. I think Trustee Gerard was serving as our chair.
Oh, I was?
I thought so. Would you like to be the chair? It's
Okay.
not noted on the sheet,
All right.
but okay. I guess we could have co-chairs. Okay, and then the last one would be of the committees is the Gateway Subcommittee. And I propose that it remain with Trustee Gerard, myself, and in place of Trustee Alvaro, that we add Trustee Torres. Acceptable? Okay.
It's good that Trustee Torres has figured out that as vice president, he needs to be on
All
all
the committees.
subcommittees.
And
That's
once you're
pretty
not
good.
on, you're the alternate.
Right? And I am the chair of that subcommittee. Okay, and then let's see, I think it's pretty much the same for most all of the representatives. Everybody indicated that they would like to stay in mostly in their positions. So for the LCAP, Trustee Gerard, is that accurate? Yes. For the SMCSBA, I will stay in that position. For the County Committee on School District Organization, Trustee Lempert would like to remain. For the Coalition for Safe Schools and Communities, Trustee Cannon and Trustee Gerard will remain. For the Big Lift, we will make one change. Trustee Cannon will remain, and then Trustee Torres will take Trustee Camacho's space. And for the representative to the SELPA, this does hold true to the comment, but Trustee Torres will take my place on the SELPA representative subcommittee. And with that, I think we have filled all of the spaces.
And may I add just one comment?
Did I? Oh, he missed a couple. Yes, Superintendent McGee?
Just with supporting all of these committees, and there's a lot of work that this represents. So I sort of discovered over the last 2 years that the way we were supporting the subcommittees wasn't really sustainable. Mostly the superintendent and Patricia Love would help manage everything and schedule everything and get all the materials together. And I just think there's too much here and too much work for that. So what I have proposed to core cabinet is that I will assign a core cabinet member to each committee to support. And then we can divide and conquer the work a little bit easier. And it's not so much on my shoulders to manage it all. we want to be collaborative and in step with the subcommittees. And in the past, it's always been that staff supports the board in managing the subcommittee. We get you the materials you need, we gather information, we help schedule meetings so that you can focus on the work itself and not have to do that work. So I think having a subcommittee support person from staff would be the best way to help manage everybody and make sure you aren't able to meet because I'm too overwhelmed with everything else that's going on. So that seems like a better way to go.
That sounds like a great plan. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Also, we need to vote to approve these. Is there a motion to approve these 2024 board subcommittee assignments?
So
moved. Madam President, is there, I doubt there's any public comment, but is that?
Yeah, I didn't ask for
Yeah.
public comment. Is there any public comment on this matter?
There are no hands up.
No hands. Okay, sorry, forgot that. All right. Somebody made a motion. Trustee Torres, did you
Yes.
make a motion? Okay. Is there a second?
second,
Okay, thank you. Trustee Gerard with the second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. All right, motion passes 7-0. And thank you all for going through that exercise. I know it was a little bit addition to go through each and every one, but actually I learned a lot by listening, so I appreciate it very much. And now we are on to item 9C. Is there a motion to approve resolution number 24-2, implementing board policy 9250 to compensate Susan Alvaro for her absence from the December 13th, 2023 board meeting due to illness?
I move that we adopt the resolution.
second,
Motion was made by Mr. Cannon, second by trustee Gerard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'm an aye. The motion passes. Oh, are there any abstentions? Susan, trustee Alvaro is abstaining. So the motion passes with a vote of 6 for, none against, 1 abstention. And we are on to item 9D. Board members will comment. Let's see, where shall we begin? Trustee Alvaro, do you want to start us off?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a couple things because I haven't been here for a couple of meetings. First of all, and I won't do this in my official voice, I'll do this in my unofficial voice. Nancy, it's good to see you back. I'm glad you're well enough to be here.
Thank you.
Mr. Camacho and Kalima Salahuddin presented apparently at the Leadership Institute toward the end of last year. You don't even remember, you did it. I'll remind you. It was very inspiring, apparently, to some people who were in participation, because I got some calls from some people that I knew who had been there. I didn't even know you were doing it. And they said, tell me more about the Board of Education. Tell me more about the work you do. How can I come to your meetings? How can I Zoom and participate? And it was quite nice to hear that level of enthusiasm coming off your presentation. So thank you for doing that. And thank you to Kalima. I didn't get a chance to congratulate Lillian Flores McDonald and Sarah Ortiz on their retirements. I've worked with both of them a very long time. And I just think Lillian with the SELPA and Sarah with the Court and Community Schools have been absolute rocks. And I will miss both of them. And I wanted to thank them for all their work and congratulate them on their retirement. I want to thank Mr. Ard. I wasn't here when we did your little retirement reception, but thank you for all you've done over the last many years, but especially as board president this last couple of years. So thank you very much, Bev, for doing a great job and leading us through. It's been some ridiculous few years, and I think everybody gets extra gold stars for pulling through it. Congratulations to our new president, Ms. Bonini, and to our new vice president, Mr. Torres. I will not be able to attend the Capital Advisors meeting here because I have a conflict, but I am going to be able to Zoom with them on February 1st because it's Inyo County or something like that. It's doing a Zoom. And so I was able to sign up for that. And then just lastly, a little editorial comment because I feel like it. I was really shocked to hear that CSBA unilaterally decided that CCBE wasn't worth bothering with. I'm wondering what value CSBA will continue to bring to us. And I think perhaps at some point we could have some discussion as to how we as a board proceed with this situation. Because, you know, Ms. Gerard knows because she's been at the forefront of it, but how hard we fought to get recognition as county boards and why county boards are different and how we can work together. And to hear that this just got thrown off the table is pretty appalling. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Camacho?
Happy New Year, everyone. I don't have too much to report because I took a winter vacation, which was well and coming. I'm glad that I did that. But I will report that I'm not going to be able to attend our next meeting. I have to travel for work. So that's the 24th, I believe it is. So just so that you all know something, you know that I won't be here for that one. But look forward to a restart of the committees. I think being away actually, in the early days of the pandemic, we tried to fit those in. Kind of being away from everything slowed a lot of the work down, but I think we can get into a good groove and a good pace again, which will be kind of neat. So I'm excited about the new committees and the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Bethany, do you have comments this evening?
Sure. So I hope everyone had a wonderful New Year and excellent holiday. This upcoming Monday through Wednesday, I'll be attending SABLE, a conference held by the California Association of Student Councils. And as the San Mateo County delegate, I'll be meeting other youth from California who serve as student board members, and we'll be coming up with a policy proposal to present to the California Assembly's Committee on Education. So I'm thrilled to be able to do that and very grateful for the opportunity. And also, if anyone has any suggestions for policies that you feel I should consider, please do feel free to reach out to me or send an email to Patricia, who can relay the information to me.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And
for
may I
sharing.
add that Bethany's going to celebrate her birthday next week. Is that right? It's January 13th. What's today, the 10th?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Saturday.
Saturday.
Saturday, yeah.
Okay, so happy birthday to Bethany.
Thank you very much.
Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, Trustee Lemper, do you have comments?
Happy New Year, although it's been a busy 10 days. New Year seems a long time ago. Happy birthday, and Bethany loves your engagement and involvement on this board. Thank you. And just awesome to see you, Superintendent McGee. I've been thinking about you daily. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Cannon?
Thank you, Chelsea. Yes, delighted to have Nancy back, looking good and being strong tonight. And thank Nancy for the kind words. She always does such a nice job. And for example, with Bev's farewell as president last month and thanking us tonight, and always does such a good research and sincere presentations for us. Thank you for that. And thanks all the folks and that took part in preparing the flowers and the cake and the cookies and so forth. Congratulations to our negotiators. That's a huge thing. I just never can let that go by because I have seen over decades the negative effects of offices that cannot do the great job that you folks do with negotiations. Very challenging job. And I want to thank Chelsea for such a smooth process for doing the committee assignments, giving us a chance to think about them ahead and talking them through tonight. So thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you. Trustee Gerard?
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to wish everybody a happy new year. Seems like a long time ago that we met, and it kind of was. And also, welcome Superintendent McGee back. It's so nice to see you again. We're so happy that you're feeling well enough to be back with us.
Thank you.
So that's very special. I'm going to jump right in on a comment before I say anything else, addressing Susan's comment about talking about CCBE. You all know I had a very passionate discussion at our last meeting about how I felt about it. And Susan, that's exactly what we need to do. What we, a group talked about last night, I was on a 2-hour meeting, was getting information from our fellow board members and making it formal and presenting it to CSBA. So I would really appreciate a discussion like that and to get comments in writing so that they can be passed on to the powers that be at CSBA. Having said that, I was chosen to be on the transition committee by CSBA. CSBA made the choices. There are only 15 of us out of the entire state that are on this committee. And so in some respects, it's kind of scary because we want to make sure we really do a good job. So any input and help is much appreciated. And then also, John McPherson is going to call an actual board of directors meeting before January 29th, because until January 29th, CCBE is still in existence. So he's still president and we're still all board of directors instead of Region 14. So we will be doing that. And I wanted to let everybody know that. The meeting is Friday from 10 to 12. So we'll see what happens. That's the transition meeting. I want to wish Bethany a happy birthday and congratulations on representing us. That is very exciting and we're very proud of you. So thank you so much. We know how important that is to you. So that makes it even more special. And I also want to thank everyone for this recognition tonight of the board with the beautiful flowers. And I love the napkins even match my outfit, which was even better. The cake was absolutely delicious and can't wait to get into those cookies. And there goes my New Year's resolution on losing weight, which seems to go by the wayside every year. So there you go. I am going to be busy from now until our next meeting because I will be attending the Celebration of Life for Don Horsley on Saturday, the 17 District PTA Superintendent's Luncheon on the 19th, and the San Mateo County School Boards Association dinner meeting on the 22nd. And I'm also going to be attending, which I talked to Jennifer about, the Capital Advisors budget meeting, but that's after our next meeting. So thank you for all the great reports tonight. They were very informative. And it's a great way to start the new year. So thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Torres?
Yes, thank you. So yesterday I was able to stop by the Siena Youth Center's teen hangout night. So I was able to speak with a couple of middle schoolers and high schoolers, primarily in the Redwood City and North Fair Oaks area. And they all had the same question, asking where the board stood in terms of the ceasefire. So I told them that I would plant the seed with the board to start having those discussions and what we want to do with that. So if they're listening, there's my seed and I will follow up with them. They were very passionate. So I love the fact that they were advocating for other students and other families. And you could just really see their passion. And I know that they're working towards taking action on being more vocal and heard so that other students are also aware. And that is all.
Thank you. And I'll just make a couple of comments. Well, first, Happy New Year to everyone, and thank you for making this meeting as seamless as possible. I'm already feeling a little more comfortable. I wanted to just note a couple of other events. I've shared them before, but in addition to this very long list of events for January, there are some events coming up in February, which I guess are technically after our next meeting. But the Superintendent McGee has graciously offered to host 2 meetings that I'm co-chairing. One's for SMCSBA, which I don't think is on our list yet, which is our legislative brunch, which is on the 3rd, on Saturday, 3rd of February, from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And we have Congressman Kevin Mullen as our keynote. We have Santa Clara County Supervisor Joe Simidian moderating our legislative panel, and we're still confirming all of our local legislators, but it should be really great. We're hoping to have attendees from Santa Clara County as well. And then on the 10th, we are going to be in, I think, almost every open space
On the roof.
in this building, at least on the first floor, and maybe outside for the Transition to Independence Fair for the Commission on Disabilities. And that should be great. Hopefully it won't be raining and we will be able to use some of the outside space too. But that runs from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So I hope that you'll be able to join both of those events. And then I think it might not be on here yet either. There's another, I mentioned it last time, there's another event through CSBA or SMCSBA, which will be on March 25th. It's one of our dinner meetings. So put that on your calendar if it's not already populated. And that's going to be a discussion around multi-tiered systems of support and dyslexia and inclusion and other things like that. Those are my event notes. I just want to thank the board for being really engaged in discussing the committees, and it's really important work that we do. And so I really appreciate learning more and figuring out which positions people feel comfortable in so that they can be really, really productive. So thank you. And Nancy, it's very good to see you. I'm glad you're feeling better and that you're here. And happy birthday to Bethany. That'll be exciting. Saturday is a good day for birthday. And how lovely to have all of these wonderful gifts and be appreciated as school board members and other school boards in the county. So I'm sure that'll be ongoing. But thank you so much. And with that, I think I have to go back to my script because I have to read the end. So our item 10 is our adjournment. Our next regular meeting will take place on Wednesday, January 24th, 2024 at 7 p.m. And this meeting is adjourned.
It was a little jolt to realize how long ago it is that we were on that committee.
I know.
As a superintendent.
Yeah, it's February 12th and 13th. And
It's obvious, but I never thought of it.